Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We've got a great show for you this week. The Chevy Camaro is dead. We knew this was coming. Chevy announced last week, middle of the week, that after the 2024 model year, that's it for the Camaro. It's not the end of the story for the Camaro is what they're saying, but they did not announce really any other details. So big news on that front. We're also going to talk about the Ferrari Roma Spider. That's pretty cool. A little bit more news out of the Dodge world as far as what might be next also for that Charger Banshee concept that we heard about last fall. And then Ford has announced that it's going to break out its earnings via 3 different units. And they lost about $3 billion on EVs. So that's kind of interesting. We'll break down what that means. What have we been driving? News editor Joel Stocksdale has been driving the Hummer and the Ford F-150 Lightning Pro. I've been the Toyota Sienna minivan, still in our long-term fleet. So with that, welcome aboard, Joel.
Hey.
How you doing?
Yeah, doing all right. It's kind of rainy here in Michigan.
It's definitely one of those kind of like weird late March days, let's put it that way. Kind of melancholy, which is maybe a good way to frame up the discussion for the end of the Camaro. We did not much out there on it. Just, Chevy kicked out a statement last week. And it's going to be a short model year. They're going to let it, the 24 is the final one, and January is the final month that they're going to actually produce these things. So, they definitely could have strung it out a little bit more, but sounds like they're not going to. What do you think?
Well, I'm sad to see it go. I've been a big fan of the 6th generation Camaro pretty much right from when it came out. I've always felt it was actually the best driving of the 3 American muscle sports cars, even if the interior packaging wasn't quite as good. So I'm disappointed to see it go, but I'm not surprised. I don't think you are either. It's been a while since this generation launched, and it's getting pretty old. And everything's going electric, so it's kind of time. I'm just glad that Chevy has confirmed that this isn't the end of Camaro entirely. So I'm really hoping for an electric Camaro to show up in the next couple of years. I think that'll be pretty great.
Yeah, I think the past is prologue. The Camaro has gone away and come back. For a period, it was actually replaced as sort of like the sporty coupe by the Monte Carlo. You might remember that for a minute. And then it came back, as more of a little bit more of a direct competitor to the Mustang as compared to, say, the Monte Carlo, which was like a Thunderbird competitor or whatever they were trying to do with that. So, it'll be back, as they have said. I agree with you. I think, what you said tracks. It is probably overall the best handling, but it's also perhaps the most aggressive of the Detroit 3 pony cars. Definitely the Challenger is bigger. It's based on what's essentially a 4-door sedan platform. So it's a bigger car. It's all about the power. The Mustang is a nice blend, but, just Chevy has really dialed in the chassis with the Camaro and for this most recent generation. And I think it's done a good job for them. The sales numbers have fallen off a bit, so that's not surprising. They've done a lot of interesting variants of it, many of which the fan base is definitely liked. But I think like you said, it's time. I think it's just, pull the cord now, kind of be done with this as it is, and then figure out what's next. Is it going to be electric? Where are they going to go from here? So it's interesting because with so little information about what's next, you're kind of just left to almost talk about the end, So, and it is going out, I would say, a little bit, on a quiet note. But, we'll see what's next. It's, I've seen a lot of crazy ideas. Could they do some sort of Camaro crossover? Obviously we expect there will be some form of electrification. We'll see. We really don't know. I don't think, just kind of looking at the way things have set up, that they would probably make Camaro a crossover, but who knows? We'll see. Stranger things have happened.
Yeah, I feel like Blazer is going to pretty effectively fill that slot of kind of performance-ish crossover for Chevy, especially since they're offering it with like a straight up rear drive version and like a really hot SS all-wheel drive version. So I don't think there would be a whole lot of value in making a Camaro SUV of some sort.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, I've always said this, that I thought the Blazer looks pretty good. That frankly, if you would try to call it Camaro, I don't really think it would be, other than just the obvious pushback from a styling standpoint, a pretty sporty looking crossover. I've said this before. It looks about as much like a Camaro as the Mach-E looks like a Mustang, you know? If you look at the long, hood and the headlights, I mean, it's very sporty. So, I guess we'll see. Yeah. Do you have a favorite generation of Camaro?
Honestly, it probably is this last one, just because it just drove so well. I really, really like it. I do have some fondness for the 4th gen Camaro, mainly just for the way it looks. And I wouldn't mind seeing like a future electric Camaro maybe taking a little bit more of its styling from that generation as opposed to like the early 1st and 2nd generation cars.
From an electric vehicle perspective, as far as like how it would look aesthetically, I think that could actually hold a lot of water, because that was like ahead of its time design in many ways. It was a departure from what they had done in the 70s and 80s. It was kind of futuristic, for that era. So I could see that. I liked Gen 2 and Gen 3. Those were, the 1st generation. That's iconic, right? What's not to like? But that was not my favorite. I tended to like the 70, 71, 72. I thought those were really outstanding looking cars. And then just the 3rd generation, 82 to 92, that's just kind of right into my like early years. So I remember those cars. Like, they were toys, they were on TV, like everybody remembers those cars. So that could be another look that I think, frankly, they might be wise to bring back, because by the time they sort of cycle back with the new generation of Camaro, like a lot of people like in my age bracket will be like fondly remembering that car and have like the disposable income to burn on a Camaro. So, something for them to think about. But so that's the big news. I mean, anytime, one of the iconic, Detroit muscle cars, pony cars, sports cars goes away, that's big news. But, I guess we'll move on. A little more kind of news nuggets out of Dodge. With this is kind of comes on the heels of the Challenger Demon. That's the 170 that they revealed last Monday. Basically, we're hearing some things that maybe next August that we might see the new Charger and Challenger, which would track with when they revealed the concept, if you will. They've mentioned that they always have kind of wanted to do something like a 68 Charger type vehicle, which makes me think maybe the concept, the Banshee concept, maybe a little truer to life than maybe we thought. We'll see. So, yeah, I mean, it's more to come on this front. Let's put it that way. And for what it's worth, the Charger and Challenger will continue through this model year as we know them until the very end. So unlike Camaro, which is really taking a knee and running out the clock pretty quick, the Charger and Challenger, which, I mean, isn't that like a very Charger Dodge play here, is to just keep running this as long as you can. So a little bit more news on the Banshee front. I guess we'll see here.
Yeah, it's, I mean, Dodge sure knows how to tease stuff.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that when they finally launch stuff about like the future Charger and Challenger successors, that they do look close to the Banshee, because it's excellent looking.
Yeah.
And it does look very production kind of ready. I am a little bit concerned though, after the Ram electric concept turned out to be quite different from what we're actually getting, since that Ram concept was quite like blank sheet, pretty radical, and it's turning out that the first Ram electric truck is basically is going to follow the form of the F-150 Lightning, where they've electrified kind of the truck that we know right now. I'm a little bit concerned that it may not be quite as exciting as we're hoping from the concept, but we'll see.
Yeah, the kind of the news nugget here is that Tim Kuniskis, the Dodge CEO, said, hey, we haven't fully pulled back the cover, which, to your point, Dodge loves to tease us. But, that does, sort of lend itself to speculation that, we're going to see more. So my guess is we're going to see a Charger and a Challenger. I'm not quite sure how they're going to look. They've basically said that without saying it totally. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it has to be two products. Like, there's no way they could get away with just a 2-door and no 4-door, or the other way around.
Yeah.
Especially with how many Chargers that they sell.
To me, it was a little confusing when they showed that concept though last August, because it was a 2-door Charger. So you're like, on one hand, I'm like, hell yeah, that sounds great. On the other hand, you're like, well, wait a minute. The Charger is a sedan. So, at least in its current form. So, I mean, they could, get creative, make it like the 2-door, more of a limited one. And then you have the Challenger, which maybe does some other things. Maybe it's more of like, it steers into kind of like being a Mustang competitor, being a, like, all the drag racing themes that they've tried to roll out with the Demon. Maybe you incorporate some of that into the Challenger. And then the Charger is perhaps maybe a little more retro based off this concept. I don't know. I mean, it's tricky because it does feel like they're going after the same customer here and slicing the apple really thin, even though both like things are very desired. Although historically, neither the Challenger nor the Charger lasted all that long. Like the Challenger didn't last that long in the 70s. So, I guess we'll see. More on that to come. I guess we can shift gears over to a former Dodge stablemate in the Fiat Chrysler stable. That would be Ferrari, before they were spun off, is part of, this was a few years ago when they did a stock offering, but Dodge and Ferrari were stablemates, I guess, if you will, briefly in the greater Stellantis. It wasn't Stellantis, it was Fiat Chrysler empire back in the day. This is the Ferrari Roma. Nothing groundbreaking here, but it is the first front-engined convertible, soft top specifically, in about 50 years. So it looks pretty good, I think. It's let me put it this way. It's hard to have a new Ferrari come and not at least comment on it. And usually we talk about how it looks because we don't really get too many of them through the press fleet. So I think this is, their customers are going to like it. You get a little bit extra weight. I think they said 185 pounds. But I mean, whatever. Engine is a 3.9 liter V8. That's 612 horsepower. And yeah, I mean, it's a very handsome coupe. The sticker is 247,000, which is, this sounds weird, but not that bad. It just seems like the way car prices have been going up, that's about what I almost would expect a Ferrari to cost these days. But I like the front end. It's a nice blend of like traditional kind of beautiful Ferrari styling, especially for a front engine, coupe like this. But it's a little edgier up front with that grille. So I like it. What do you think?
Well, so the Ferrari Roma I haven't driven any of the new Ferraris, so I can't comment on how they drive, but the Roma is probably about my favorite in the lineup right now, purely on a looks perspective. I think it looks distinct, and it looks way cleaner and more elegant than any of the other Ferrari models right now. I'm also a fan of convertibles. However, I am not really liking this combination of the two. I really, really like the shape of the regular Roma. and I don't think cutting off the roof has done it any favors. I feel like it looks kind of bulbous and lumpy in the back, which I'm especially a little bit surprised that they couldn't have made that a little bit less prominent, since they've gone to a soft top as opposed to like a folding hard top like on the old Ferrari California. So to be honest, I'm kind of disappointed about this.
Yeah, it's an interesting tactic. Let's put it that way, to do it this way. I like the California too. That was a fun car to drive. It definitely, I know that one was a little polarizing when it launched for some of the tifosi, I guess, as they like to be known. But it's this is sort of a practical Ferrari. Let's put it that way. All right. Let's see. So we've got this is actually the first earnings period, and we'll make this interesting. Like, stay with us here. Ford announced that they are going to break out earnings among their three different like parts of their business, if you will. So you've got the electrics, you've got like the work stuff, which is Ford Pro. Electrics are Ford E, and then there's Ford Blue, I guess, as they're calling it, for like the traditional like internal combustion business. And kind of the headline is that Ford expects to lose $3 billion for the electrics. I've seen that a couple different places. They've put out some numbers, and they're going to go more into this in the coming weeks as they really steer into this reporting method. To me, this is, and they did say they expect to cut into this and make it so it's not like they're going to keep hammering away with these big losses as their EVs come online and they scale them up. But that's quite the headline to wake up to, like your EV business lost $3 billion. I mean, in some ways I can almost think, why? Part of me is like, why did you guys do it this way as far as the financial reporting? Because it doesn't help your case for like, not that Ford would ever like break itself up or do a spinoff. If there's any company that would not do that, it's Ford. But I mean, hey, I'm all for transparency, but it's a weird look. Let's put it that way. They have room to go on their journey. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if the thinking might be that like, I kind of wonder if the thinking is that by separating out the EV section, they can be like, listen, this is not a corporate-wide thing where we're losing money everywhere. That it's just that we're losing money here where we're having to spend a lot of money to get set up and ready to go. I sort of think it might be a case of like we're trying to make sure that it is clear that like we're still plenty profitable everywhere else. It's just that we've got this one section that we kind of have to spend money on because that's where the industry is going. It's going to be expensive, but like we're trying to make it clear that it's not a case of everything is going badly. At least that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, it's we talked about this on the podcast a while ago with consumer editor Jeremy Korzeniowski, and we were both kind of like, well, this is going to make for some really interesting earnings calls, like, because it's going to make part of your business look really good and part of it not. But it's also, I mean, again, it's an interesting approach. It's very creative. My guess is the folks at General Motors and Honda are probably saying to themselves this morning, well, I think we're kind of glad we're not doing it this way. But I give Ford props for doing it this way. Jim Farley, as the CEO, has been nothing if not bold and like willing to take some risks and shake things up, which if you've ever met him, he's a leader who takes strong stands and goes for them, right or wrong. So interesting move, we'll see. We'll see how the next quarter does. And obviously if it gets better, that's a very good story for them. If it gets worse, I mean, in some ways that could create a problem that maybe might not have existed. So we'll see. So speaking of electrics, you drove the Hummer SUV. I'm really interested to hear how this went. I've driven the truck. I liked it. It's crazy. It's fun. But, obviously some people, the Hummer, as you would expect, has been a bit of a lightning rod. So what did you think of it as an SUV?
Well, perhaps not surprisingly, pretty much drives like the truck because it's pretty much the truck. It's just shorter. um, and if you like the truck, you will like the SUV. And honestly, I still rather like it.
Okay.
Kind of the biggest differences it is just shorter. Let's see, I've got the exact shortness written down here that I am blanking a little bit on. Well, and of course it does have the cargo area that's now covered and it's not a truck bed, which offers, more weather protected space, but obviously you can't really carry quite as tall items due to the fact that, you've got a roof. It's kind of a weird looking cargo area just because, well, and really the whole thing looks a little bit funny from the back just because of the proportions. It's so squat. The body area is so short, but it's also so incredibly wide. And actually, the side hinged tailgate, it opens out so far. You're really going to want to make sure that if you're opening that up, that you don't have too much behind you. It's pretty funny. And it was interesting. They had us driving in like downtown San Francisco and on back roads kind of around Napa Valley, which are not exactly places that you would immediately think to drive a truck that's like 7 feet wide, and weighs like close to 9,000 pounds. And that definitely showed up while driving around. It was when it's been a while since you've driven one, and probably even if you've been experienced but haven't driven in this situation, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking because you don't want to graze cars on one side and you don't want to have a textbook small overlap crash like the IIHS tests for on the other end. But once you get used to it, it does surprisingly well, especially on those twisty back roads. I was really impressed. It doesn't roll a huge amount. The steering it's a little bit vague off center, and some of that might have been that the test car that I was driving had the 35-inch mud terrain tires. Probably didn't do wonders for the feedback and accuracy, but once you kind of got that dialed in, it was actually pretty linear and it didn't roll too much, and you could even carry a little bit of speed. And like as long as you were checking your edges that you weren't going to hit anything, it was actually almost fun to kind of try and hustle it down these back roads. Especially like got good power behind you and you've got good throttle response, especially with it was actually really nice having the one pedal driving on those back roads. It was easy to quickly start slowing down if you needed to, because you just have to lift off the gas. You're not having to come off the gas and onto the brakes and stuff like that. So it was, it did surprisingly well there. And it actually kind of looked the part too. All around Napa Valley, I was seeing like Land Rover Defenders and G-Classes and Raptors and actually probably the most Mercedes EQSs I've seen anywhere. So really expensive, distinctly styled off-road ready electric car kind of seems like the perfect vehicle for that area. And all the techno whiz-bang features like those fancy suspension and the fancy infotainment and all the cool lighting and stuff on the outside kind of fit in with the Silicon Valley area too. So I ended up having a good time with it. It's definitely got its flaws. It is crazy heavy. It's crazy big. It's not super efficient, but for what it is, I think it's pretty neat.
It's interesting you say that, because I feel like we talked about this before when it was like, hey, where's this Hummer drive? And it's like Napa. Okay. But, when you think about some of even the ritzier areas around Metro Detroit, you see Defenders, Land Cruisers, G-classes, Escalades just rolling around. And it's not like somebody's driving up the side of a mountain. They're just rolling up and down, the local streets. So it makes a lot of sense, because I think the way they want to position the Hummer is as a status symbol. I mean, that's what they want to do it as. And it's an electric status symbol. It created a ton of excitement, when they launched it with the Super Bowl commercial, and then people are really excited about it. It's just one of the quintessential American luxury goods, to be quite honest. It's enormous. It's in your face. It does have the latest technology, electrification. It's instantly recognizable. It's built in Detroit, which also I think gives, people do like that kind of element, if you will, of American luxury. So to me, that's what this is a luxury play. I'm really intrigued to try the SUV. I don't think it's going to, drive all that different than the truck, but I'm curious if I might it's like with the Wrangler versus the Gladiator argument, which one am I just going to kind of connect with more? And I suspect that might, I think it's going to be, I think I'm going to stay with the truck, but I don't know. Keeping an open mind, because I like the Wrangler more than the Gladiator from a use case standpoint. So.
Yeah. And while we didn't get a chance to off-road this one because it was super rainy in the Napa area, and the off-road course that they had set up, they decided against doing it because they didn't want to tear up the grounds too badly. But you get all of the same off-road gear from the truck, but the whole thing is 20 inches shorter, which means you've got way better breakover angle, and also with less hanging over the back, you've got a much better departure angle. And of course, less truck is better for off-roading anyway. And for maneuverability, the shorter wheelbase and the shorter overall length means it's got a better turning circle. The turning circle is 1.7 feet shorter than the truck's. And amazingly, its turning circle is actually about 3 feet tighter than a Chevy Bolt EUV's, which is really wild. It tells you how much that rear wheel steering is doing to help you out with maneuvering. That also comes in handy when you're getting around in tight parking lots and stuff, and you need all the help you can get with a 7-foot wide truck. I
was surprised how much that steering feature helped, at least on the truck. It's not that hard to drive. I've driven F-250s or something that were harder to drive just because of the very traditional dynamics. This for driving a battleship on wheels, and speaking of the truck, wasn't that bad. I pulled it up to the hospital valet because we had to do an unscheduled emergency room trip and everybody was fine. But, those places are pretty tight. They have overhangs, there's people coming and going. And, the Hummer super truck, if you will, was fine. Definitely got some attention, let's put it that way. And it's interesting too, you mentioned how kind of driving around, there's that balance between trying to push the vehicle, but also you're in a setting where it's a little challenging, and I remember being on an Aston Martin press trip, and we were pushing the DB11, and it was you want to drive it fast, but you never know when a Piaggio might just come out of nowhere, or there's chickens on the side of the road. So sometimes these press trips can be very adventuresome. Let's put it that way. So, and one other thing about this, the Hummer still gets so much attention. Which depending on your personality, that may be a good thing or a bad thing. I think around Detroit, we've all gotten a little bit jaded about seeing Hummers because, we saw test ones forever,
And then we saw the trucks before most everybody else, and they're kind of all over the place. But around Napa, I was getting so many double takes, like on the interstate, and people checking it out in town and on the back roads. And actually, at one point, driving through a little town around Napa, a guy in a garbage truck full on stopped the truck, rolled his window down, and like took, I think, like a video or something of the truck driving by.
Okay.
So it is a big attention getter, and I think that's one thing that might have forgotten a little bit, living in Detroit the whole time, and this is kind of a weird automotive bubble compared with the rest of the country.
Yeah, no, that's true. That can be fun. It could also be, it's different. Let's put it that way too. Because you get a lot of, like, everybody's an expert. So any other thoughts about the GMC Hummer SUV?
I mean, I like it. I can see why some people wouldn't. I think it's probably just as polarizing as like the Mercedes G-Class. I would personally have the Hummer over a G-Class because I think it's a much more interesting vehicle all around. But yeah, I mean,
that's a tough call. But I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, I like that it's all electric. I like that it just has so much really cool engineering going on in it. It's got so many cool features, and I kind of appreciate that it feel like inside and out, the whole thing feels more like it's made for somebody that actually might take it off-road, whereas I feel like the G-Class is definitely capable of being taken off-road and going off-road, but it definitely feels like at least the US spec ones are made for people that very likely never will take them off-road. Like, anybody that's going to take it off-road is probably going to be like the second or third owner that is like, I've always wanted a G-Class to actually take off-roading, but can't afford a new one and wouldn't want to take a new one off-road.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely one of those things too, where, even with the Galanda wagon, it is such a swanky vehicle. And, I don't know, I would be more concerned about bending the fenders. Let's put it that way. I mean, there's something about, not that I'd smash the Hummer into the side of a trail, but I don't know. Mentally, that's almost easier to calibrate. Let's put it that way.
And I mean, the irony of me saying that, though, of course, is that the G-Wagon is much narrower, and so it would actually be easier to fit down a lot of trails than a Hummer would. But yeah,
that's a good point.
But I don't know. The Hummer kind of fits me a little bit better. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit more redneck than a lot of car journalists. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, you could look at it and say it's like very, like, because it is electric. It's, it is a modern design. I mean, I don't know. The Hummer it's cool. I think there's a lot to like. When I drove it, this was over a year ago at this point, as far as like doing kind of like the truck first drive. It was like a prototype drive out at Milford. All sorts of like everybody was interested by it. Let me put it that way. So it really was kind of like a crossover in that sense, if you will.
Actually, something else that I will say, something that I do like about the Hummer better than the G-Class is the Hummer handles a lot better. And that's kind of a big one for me.
I believe that.
And the whole thing kind of drives like a full-size American truck. And I like the way full-size American trucks drive. They drive really well. So
yeah, I agree.
So that's kind of part of it too.
All right. Sounds good. So we'll move over to the F-150 Lightning Pro. This crossed your driveway, I guess, somewhat recently. What did you do with this full-sized American truck that you like to drive, those dynamics?
Yeah, I didn't really do anything particularly trucky.
Okay.
Mostly just kind of running to the grocery store, going through drive-thrus, took Rusty for rides in it.
Okay.
Which didn't feel too bad about, because it's a Lightning Pro. It is at a base trim level. It's got the black bumpers and black door handles, and it doesn't have the full width lighting, and it's got the smaller infotainment screen, and it's got just kind of the plain leatherette seats and rubber floors. But honestly, I think this might actually be about my favorite looking configuration of it, because it looks more trucky. It doesn't look as glitzy as kind of the higher trim F-150s. And even though it's got the smaller screen, it's still an enormous infotainment screen, and it's still really nice and easy to use. And it's also still got plenty of features. I mean, it's still got automatic climate control and heated seats. It's kind of a weird mix of nice features and lack of nice features. For instance, like, it's got push button start, but it doesn't have a proximity key for locking. You have to actually pull out the key fob and press the button to unlock the truck and get into it. You can't just grab the handle. And then vice versa for when you're getting out and locking it up. And like, it doesn't even have like a sliding rear window, and it doesn't have like the LED lights and things. It's kind of a funny combination, but otherwise, like, I like the way it looks. It drives quite well. It's really quick, and it's impressive the way, like, when you get on it in a corner, it's neat how you can really feel both ends of it just grab and pull the truck through stuff. And I actually really like that it's got the independent rear suspension. Going on like kind of potholed exits and stuff where you're carrying a little bit of speed and going through a corner, it's way more stable than live axle trucks, where those can feel a little bit kind of wiggly going over bumps and corners and stuff. This feels way more planted. I'm not a huge fan of the way the suspension is tuned. It's really pretty soft, and I think it could actually use a little bit firmer damping, because it just kind of feels like it gets a little bit out of phase front and rear. So I wouldn't mind a little bit of suspension tweaking here and there, but for the most part, I really like it. And like, unless you're towing, or unless you are planning on like super serious off-roading, I really do feel like the Lightning is the best F-150 you can get.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, I think it's exciting. It's interesting to drive. It's, I've driven the Pro actually a couple different times, which is interesting. I feel like they've made an effort to show off the Lightning in the Pro trim. Where in the past, you might get a work version of the F-150 or work spec come through the fleet every couple of years, but it wasn't really a priority. Ram actually has always done a pretty good job of getting like the tradesmen through the press fleets. But this is kind of inside baseball. But yeah, I drove one at the North American Car, Truck, and SUV of the Year Awards right after I drove the Lordstown Endurance, which I did that on purpose. That was a tough comp for Lordstown, let's put it that way. Especially because at the time, the F-150 was like cheaper than the Lordstown. The Lordstown was coming in at like $62,300. But now, ironically, the F-150, the electric version, started to creep up, obviously, in price. But, I mean, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have even thought this was like a work truck. You would have been like, this is the future. Now, when you get in there, like, even take away the electric stuff, it's just a very nicely equipped truck. So, yeah, I need to haul some mulch here probably in the next month or so. So the next time something like this comes from the fleet, I need to try to kind of get my hands on it, go get some mulch, get some wood chips.
Yeah, and while I didn't do anything like that, going to the grocery store, I did like having the front trunk. That's a nice handy feature. Just to have kind of a smaller weather protected cargo area that's not just like the backs. Because I mean, when you're driving these larger trucks, you basically end up using the back seat as your cargo area when you're just going grocery shopping. Um, so it was nice to have that as an option. I do wish that the Pro was still as cheap as it was when it very first launched. It's
Yeah.
crept up in price a lot. I hadn't realized it. It starts at about $56,000 now,
Yep.
which for everything you're getting, I still think is a reasonable price, because you are getting a lot of battery and a lot of power. So I still think it's probably fair, but it was an amazing deal when it was starting at well under $50,000, closer to that $40,000 mark.
It was a screaming deal.
Yeah,
Remember, half the team was like, "Hey, maybe we should just all put in deposits on this and see if we could get one." Not that everybody even really needed a truck. It was just like, for 40 some grand, it's an electric F-150. Let's go.
yeah. Makes me wonder if that might have contributed a little bit to those big electric vehicle group losses for Ford.
Yeah. Well, I think they did figure out pretty quick that they were undercharging for that relative to demand, and then what they could charge.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I'd mention is that because the Pro just comes with the standard range battery and the lower output motors, and honestly, I would have a hard time feeling like I needed any more than that. I mean, if I was driving longer distances more regularly, yeah, I would want the extra battery. And like, I'll probably never say no to more power if I'm given it, but I felt more than happy with the amount of power that this has. It's even just the basic one feels a lot peppier than just about any other F-150 gas or diesel option out there.
Yeah. No, it's and honestly, like, we actually have a piece coming out later this week or next week from John Snyder, just looking at all the different trucks, the best ones on the market. Some of them are electric. We've done an electric roundup in the past before, which was cool because we need to update that because some of those ones aren't even around. Let's put it that way, or they never became a thing. But it's a really interesting time to be like in the truck market, especially as it pertains to electric. So let's talk a little bit briefly here. We'll try to run through a couple more, or one more about the Sienna. You handed it off to me. This is the first time we've had a chance to compare notes. I'm really liking it. I'm about to probably take it on a road trip, or actually, we're recording this ahead of time. By the time I'm coming to you from the future. By the time you hear this, I will likely be back. So, but it's a really solid minivan. I think it's a little debatable about what is the best in segment because, it's more like, what do you want? If you want a plug-in hybrid, then go with the Pacifica. If you want a traditional hybrid, this is your only option. There was some rumblings about the Odyssey getting one for 24, but I haven't seen any confirmation of that. I said this before. I think the Kia Carnival is probably the best looking minivan, but design's subjective. This one is, I don't think, all that great looking. It's just fine. But I'm liking it. There's a million ways to open the doors. There's rear seat entertainment. It's huge. It's comfortable. It's fuel efficient. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. What did you think?
Yeah, so I have slightly mixed feelings about the Sienna, which I talked a little bit about in kind of my first long-term road test update. The engine is both one of the best and worst parts about it because the fuel economy is fantastic. I mean, I was getting like right around 30 plus mpg kind of all the time, which is that's fantastic for a minivan, and you don't have to plug it in or anything like that. And you can get that even with all-wheel drive, which is something that like Pacifica doesn't offer. I do wish that they would offer a plug-in version though, because I mean, then it would be all that much more. It would be that much better, because you would have fully electric range too. The only thing is that that hybrid engine, it's fine when you're cruising and it's very quiet, but especially around where I live, and I would say probably through most of Metro Detroit, where most streets are probably like 40 to 50 miles an hour, at least like kind of main streets. It is so noisy and coarse when you're getting on it, because, and especially because it's just not very, it's not particularly powerful. So anytime you want to get up to speed, you can either go brutally and probably slightly unsafely slow to keep it quiet and efficient, or you floor it and you let it just drone and moan at you for a few seconds if you want to get up to speed in a reasonable amount of time. It really had me pining for the V6 and additional electric assist from the Pacifica plug-in that we had a few years ago. Or even like the more refined just all gas V6s from Kia and Honda. But again, it's really efficient, so I can't be too mad. I guess my main complaint would really be, I wish Toyota would stuff a bit more insulation under the hood and like at the firewall, especially when this thing costs more than $50,000. Like, I feel like Toyota can afford, and I feel like a lot of Toyota buyers would not be upset if they tacked on another few $100 extra to make it a little bit more refined. But that aside, I do really like, it is really, really comfortable, and Toyota's chassis are good. Like, this thing actually handles surprisingly well for a minivan. I think the Odyssey still handles a little bit better. I haven't driven a Carnival yet. Hope to change that soon in the future. But the Sienna feels surprisingly light and nimble for a minivan, and it rides impressively well. It's really comfortable. It was nice for my drive out to the Chicago show a few weeks ago. I kind of wish the driving position was a little bit more car-like. It feels very van-like, kind of upright, and kind of the steering wheel at a little bit of an angle, and kind of like stepping on the pedals as opposed to like pushing them. But it's really comfortable. It's really spacious. Wouldn't mind seeing the updated infotainment. I was a little bit surprised that this one's still rocking the old version, but it's functional. And like, if I was gonna get a Sienna, I would probably skip like this platinum version and get like, I think the SE or XSE that looks a little bit sportier. That's a personal thing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I will look for the now that you've kind of got it in my head, I'll listen for the coarseness. I have detected it. Maybe it didn't annoy me as much, but I'll listen for that again. So, again, like I said, coming at you from the future, I have a long drive ahead of me, so I'll try to be a little more in tune with that. So, do you have a favorite minivan in this segment?
I kind of think Pacifica Hybrid, because you do get a very usable electric range, and I think it looks really, really good. Like, enough so that I could almost, like, every once in a while, thinking about getting kind of a greener car, maybe possibly a replacement for the Suburban. I don't know. I like my Suburban a lot. Every once in a while, I think, I could maybe do a Pacifica Hybrid. I think the Odyssey is probably the best driving minivan on sale. I do really like the way the Kia Carnival looks. I'm a little bit surprised and disappointed that they're not offering a hybrid version of it yet, because Kia has some really good hybrid powertrains. Having driven the Sportage hybrid, that thing has an amazing powertrain. It's super smooth, it's really efficient, and it's got good power. Like, if Kia offered like a plug-in hybrid Carnival, that would probably jump to my favorite.
Well, it's, the kind of the age-old question is, where is the hybrid in the Hyundai Santa Cruz pickup truck? I think we're all kind of like, they have pretty good tech. It's like, you guys should maybe spread it out a little bit more. But cool, man. Well, good brisk show. Good catching up with you, Joel. If you're listening to this, we will have all of the news from the New York Auto Show. Press days are Wednesday and Thursday. That's the first week of April. So that is April 5th and 6th. So, come back for that next week. We'll have all of that for you. Joel's going to be there. We'll have our full team on the ground. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you enjoy the Autoblog Podcast, please like, share, subscribe. It helps us get the word out. Give us 5 stars in Apple Podcasts, if you don't mind. Spend my monies. We actually have started to drain the well there a little bit. So that's podcast@autoblog.com if you'd like us to spend your money. Be safe out there. We'll see you next week.